Hey guys, how's it going? JBH here, and happy Metal Monday. If you are seeing, this is the first episode of a series I'm starting on here where any Monday I'm able to do it. I'm going to be making a video dedicated to all things metal from any era. Other than the proto metal era, I'm actually kind of planning on starting a series on like the metal before metal kind of thing, like a hard rock series. I'm going to be kind of splicing that in with classic rock as well. I'm in the middle of figuring out like kind of scheduling different shows to do, which I'm actually going to make a video on after this as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll explain more later about what else is going on this channel. But regardless of that, yeah, this is Metal Monday. I will be doing various videos on all things metal, and it's my second greatest love, other than prog rock when it comes to music. And so I've been really looking forward to doing this today. I came up with doing this earlier because I thought it'd be a lot of fun to talk about. And what I'm talking about today is I'm going to be talking about the 5 albums that got me into death metal. Death metal, easily out of because if you understand, like, metal is way more broad than just that statement. Death metal is easily my favorite subgenre of metal. I've been into it for quite a long time, and quite a long time, coming up on 10 years now. I'm only 25, so I excuse me. I really got deep into the genre in 2013, and I'll explain more of that when I get to the album I'm talking about today. And one of the albums I'm talking about today. And I'm really looking forward to just talking about these albums, and maybe in sort of a way, maybe making this a starter pack for someone who isn't really well versed in the genre, or just maybe gushing about albums that people love and giving them more reasons to talk about how much they love them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So when it came to old school death, this wasn't the first death metal album I heard, but I feel like it's a great place to start because it's an album that came out when death metal was still fresh, and it came out from the band that a lot of people consider to be the true starters of death metal, if you're not counting Possessed, and that is, hold on just a second, sorry, and that is Death with their album Leprosy. I've always been really into this album from the first time I heard it on a trip to Nashville that I took a few years back. When I heard the album, I was just really surprised with how ahead of its time it is, because I should have had it up. I have it in front of me, but it's not telling me the year. Hold on just a second, because I know it came out in, I want to say it was 1986 maybe when it came out. No, sorry, excuse me, 1988, which is still young for the genre at that time, actually. You know, this is one of the albums that came out in early death metal that I feel like was really stripping away a lot of that thrash influence, with the down-tuned guitars and everything. And Death did this on their first album, Scream Bloody Gore, as well. But I think the best of Death, when they were doing their straight old school grimy death metal before they got technical with Human, this is the best they did with it. Leprosy is a touchstone for old school death metal. I mean, I was floored by Born Dead and Left to Die and Pull the Plug. And I've said it before on a video I came out with a couple days ago. But I don't know why I'm even naming tracks. This whole album is incredible, but particularly I love the tracks Born Dead and Pull the Plug. Just absolutely crushing work. I love Chuck's vocals and his guitar work, and it's everybody on this album is firing on all cylinders. You know, you have, at this point in the band, you have Rick Ross on lead guitar, Bill Andrews on drums, and Terry Butler. He's credited with bass, but he didn't play on the album. But Chuck himself played the bass on it, and it's a testament to how amazing Chuck was. May he rest in peace. He was an absolute powerhouse of a musician, and it's amazing to hear how a genre that was still really finding its footing at this point was already absolutely incredible. And I'm going to give a couple of honorable mentions at the end of this, but Florida was just an absolute it was an absolute it's like the house of death metal almost. I mean, you got so many bands were coming out there, particularly Death and Morbid Angel, but Death has always been my favorite, and it's been really, really cool to, after hearing this album, going back to Scream Bloody Gore, and then going forward to see their progression, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, I don't really think Death came out with a bad album. I have yet to hear, out of any of their albums, I don't think, they were all hits. There was not a single miss on their discography, so you can't really go wrong with any Death album, but if you're going to start out with, like, straight driving old school style crushing death metal, I don't think you could go wrong with Leprosy as a good starting point. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on. So the next one I'm going to talk about, when it comes to death metal, there's I feel like the two most talked about places that death metal came from, at least from what I've seen, is Florida and Sweden. And Swedish death metal is kind of its own thing entirely. It's kind of got its own sound. It's hard for me to explain it though, because even though I've been into death metal for like I said, coming up on 10 years now, I'm still learning so much about what makes the sounds so unique and different, and what makes them so. What makes this subgenre in and of itself just one big melting pot of so many things as well, which you'll come to see as we go further along in this list. But another thing that struck me about this genre is it seemed like with the Swedish bands, from what I could tell, there was a mix of a ton of melody and a ton of groove in the stuff I've heard from there. And if with the word groove, I feel like anybody who's big on this, would understand that I'm going to be talking about Entombed here. And I'm talking about Wolverine Blues. Now, I know some people might see that and be like, dude, what the heck, Left Hand Path. And actually, if I'm going to be honest with you, I think it's hard for me to choose. Wolverine Blues was such an integral album to me when I heard it, but Left Hand Path is also amazing. But again, I digress. I'm going to be talking about Left Hand Path another time, trust me. But Wolverine Blues, when I heard it, I was kind of thrown off by the fact that it was like the riffs and everything. I hate to use the word accessible, but it was also like, dude, I feel like someone who isn't into death metal but liked metal might really enjoy an album like this. But there's still those pieces of it that give it that death metal flair through the vocals and so many other things. But the thing that stuck out the most to me about this album was around the time that I found it, I had been listening to Nails a lot, and I'm sure anybody who knows who Nails is and Entombed is might know where I'm going with this. The guitar tone on the Nails albums that I was listening to at the time were it's unreal. I was like, man, I cannot get enough of how just disgustingly thick these guitars are. It was just chainsaw grind to the way the guitar sounded, and I couldn't get enough of it. Well, when I started getting into the stuff I was hearing from Entombed, I heard this and I was kind of like, wait a minute, this has got to be where they got that guitar tone from, because it sounds so similar. And I believe it's called the HM2 pedal. Is that what they're using for this guitar? And it's an unreal sound. Like, easily in metal, my favorite guitar tone comes from, I guess, I'm sure other bands might have done it beforehand. Like I said, still researching, still learning. But when I heard it on this album, I was absolutely floored that it was done so early. Like, this came out in 1993, and Left Hand Path before it came out in, actually, no, I'm sorry, Clandestine was after Left Hand Path, and that's a great album too. But 1990 was Left Hand Path, and I was just in disbelief how you could get a guitar to sound that unbelievably thick, given that, I feel like even nowadays it's kind of hard to make death metal that's really palatable production-wise. And for some reason, like, you find these classic albums that they got the right guy at the right time, and they just dialed it in. And I mean, I'm talking about production a lot, but outside the production, like, the songs themselves also speak for themselves. I Master is amazing. The title track is really, really good. Demon was another one. Demon absolutely floored me when I heard it. I can't stress enough the amount of groove on this album that there is. And honestly, if you ask me, I feel like it's one of those things where there's another death metal band. I'm not going to talk about them today because they weren't really like an integral starting band for me. But Bolt Thrower comes to mind a lot. When I first heard Bolt Thrower, all I could think about was, man, like, I mean, they were doing stuff before Entombed, but when I heard it, it kind of like connected the dots for me. Like, man, there could be a lot of groove in death metal, and there's just, I mean, some of the stuff on here, like, I never thought I would ever say, like, I want to learn how to break dance to death metal. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy how you can make songs this palatable with a sound that's so that could really come off as so uncommercial and so unpalatable. I think that's one of the biggest strengths to this album. Like, I was instantly hooked on it. Like, I didn't have any kind of period of I got to get used to this. No, I was used to it right from the get go. It's an incredible listen, within or without death metal. But I feel like if you're wanting to get into like death metal and you've literally never heard death metal before, I feel like Wolverine Blues is a great place to start. That's just me, but I highly recommend anyone to give Wolverine Blues a shot. If you just despise metal, then obviously not. But if you're into metal already, like say you're starting with thrash or something like that, and you're wanting to get heavier, go to Wolverine Blues. It's absolutely amazing. I'm not trying to say it's soft either. For some people who might see this and be like, "How is he saying?" No, I'm not saying that at all. It's extremely heavy and crushing, but at the same time, something about it just I feel like can speak to a greater audience outside of just death metal diehards. But that's my 2 cents on Wolverine Blues. Next up, so another sound that has become one of my favorite things to listen to in death metal is the death doom sound. And I feel like my choice might ruffle some feathers here, but I want it to be known that, I mean, again, I'll say it in a second. I want it to be known. I understand. There's My Dying Bride. There's, why am I skipping on the name now? Paradise Lost. There's the early Paradise Lost stuff and really some of their new stuff too. There's, I mean, speaking of new stuff, we got Hooded Menace. There's Winter. There's so many artists that I could have picked here, but really the one that made the most impact on me when it came to this sound, because I hadn't heard it up to this point, was Autopsy with Mental Funeral. I was already into like the logo and their really gory and violent album covers. I heard this first. I didn't hear Severed Survival first. But man, when I say death doom, if you know anything about doom metal, you know that the hallmarks of doom metal is how slow it is. And one of the big things with death metal is it's known to be quite fast. Expect, like, you know, Leprosy is an example. A lot of those songs are pretty blisteringly fast, but Autopsy would get fast every now and again. But like most of the time, they were mid-tempo, and then I mean, they would have, again, like I said, sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. Autopsy can get fast when they want to. They don't get like, I wouldn't say they ever really get like death fast or Morbid Angel fast, but they get fast. But most of the time when I'm listening to them, I'm really into like the mid tempo to absolutely just like level grooves. Like you can hear like the strings slapping against the neck of the guitars and the bass whenever they're playing, because it's, I hate to use the word sloppy, but it's almost played so slowly at points that it sounds kind of sloppy, which is crazy for death metal. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, like, the past 3 that I've shown aren't very technical albums, but the riff work on them, on all 3 of them, is just unreal stuff. And this Autopsy album came out in 1991. It's a very raw recording, but it's raw in the best possible sense. I love just how they sound like a band who's very, very hungry. They sound like a band that's very, very crushing. Like I mentioned earlier with Wolverine Blues, it is a heavy and crushing album, but this to me is a whole other level of heavy and crushing. Like it's absolutely, like when you listen to it, it's just kind of just like, oh man, I gotta take a bath. Like it's so dirty, it's so grimy. It is just an album that has been thrown through mud and then like picked up again and then broken in half and thrown back into it. It is just such a gross album, but I couldn't mean that in a more endearing sense. I absolutely love everything about it. It's one of the albums I often most go back to when it comes to death metal. Like when I heard it, it was just another one of those instant. I absolutely love everything that's happening here. It's fantastic. And like I said, when it comes to Death Doom, it's I completely 100% understand that there are probably better examples of Death Doom as a sound, because I feel like many people would consider Autopsy to be just a death metal band that has doom moments. But when it came to knowing that this was a sound at all, it started here for me. And I couldn't say enough how I feel like if you're looking for your death metal to slow down little bit, check out Autopsy. They're also one of those bands that I feel like they broke up for a while because, I mean, I've listened to most of their albums, but I don't remember how long they were broken up for. But their comeback also, I feel like, was met pretty warmly, because some of their most recent stuff also is really, really good and really, really fun to listen to. So, again, that's Autopsy, Mental Funeral. Can't stress enough, if you're wanting your death metal to be a little bit slower, go here. Go check this album out. It is very, very good. So, the fourth album I'm going to be talking about today, another big part of death metal is the melodeath scene, which is it's also the most popular, I don't know what you say, sub genre when it comes to death metal. And I feel like a lot of bands that might come to mind for people when it comes to that are like Carcass with Heartwork, or At the Gates with Slaughter of the Soul, and Amon Amarth with whatever album, because Amon Amarth are absolutely gigantic. But all those albums are great, but to be honest, the one that hit me the most, and what might make a lot of sense to a lot of people if you hear I'm a massive prog head, was Crimson by Edge of Sanity. This is another one. I'm going to go ahead and be straight with you here. This is one of the top 10 greatest metal albums, in my opinion. Like, top 10 favorite metal albums of all time. If you told me I had to pick 10, the Desert Island thing, if you told me I had to pick 10 metal albums to bring with me, regardless of subgenre, Crimson's coming with me. I absolutely loved this on first listen, and I listened to it again and again and again and again, and I couldn't get enough of how well it balances melody with brutality, and like there's acoustic instrumentation. There's a little bit of synth work here and there, and at the same time you have Dan Swano. I don't exactly know how to say his last name, but you have his like just crushing growl, and his frankly pretty great singing voice as well. And I also feel inclined to mention that Michael Ackerfeld from Opeth is on this album as well. He does additional vocals and some lead guitar. I heard this before I heard Opeth. Like, weirdly enough, I don't know. I saw the album cover and it appealed to me, and I just gave it a shot, and I was in love with it. And it's another Swedish death metal album, and it kind of shows you like all the facets and sides to Swedish death metal. And this came out the year I was born as well, 1996. And I don't see how that applies. It's just, it's a fun little tidbit I like to think about with this album. When it comes to the album itself, it's one track. It's a single 40-minute track, so I guess you can call it the thick as a brick of melodeath. It's really, really great. Listen, it's so hard because I feel like I've said so much about the other albums and not too much about this one. I don't really know how to explain it. It's 1 minute gorgeous, 1 minute crushing. It's 1 minute like just really calming. Like there's so much about this album that it's so hard to put into words why I love it as much as I love it and why I keep going back to it. It's also a concept record. I'm not going to go super deep into the story, but like a quick synopsis that I'm just looking at right now. Like it tells a story of a distant future when human civilization is about to end. I'll leave it at that. I'll let you listen to the album and the rest of yourself. But man, this is an album I keep constantly kicking myself that I don't have a vinyl copy of yet. I know I need to get one. Again, I I recently have gotten back into vinyl collecting, and I've recently started getting metal albums put in there because like I said, I mostly have 70s prog, but oh man, I can't express enough how incredible this album is and how much it means to me as someone who gets into metal and who's gotten into metal, it and it's also one of the cases where I feel like its sequel, while it's not as good, it's still great. Um, Crimson had a sequel. It was the last album that Edge of Sanity did in the early 2000s. Um, but yes, please do yourself a favor and go listen to this if you haven't yet. Like just put it on and let it take you away. There's no words to describe like the haunting beauty and the powerful brutality that this album has. It's a masterpiece in every sense of the word. I can't stress enough how much I love it. I'm sorry. I feel like I didn't really do too much justice for that one, but again, it kind of leaves me speechless a lot of the times. It's an incredible record. All right, and so finally, we come to what I think is the most important album on the list. It's also actually, you know what? It's very important, but I like another album in this band's discography more now. But I can't stress enough how me as a metalhead now it wouldn't be the same. I was already into thrash metal at this point in time. Let me just take you back to where I was. So in 2013, I had already been a fan of Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and like a lot of thrash metal for a good amount of time because my dad still is a really big fan of thrash metal, but and I got into it because of him. He played me a lot of stuff I hadn't heard, and I became a big thrash guy for a while. But I could never get around to death growls. Like for some reason, I couldn't wrap my head around them, and I had a lot of friends who were into grindcore and all kinds of genres like that, and that just didn't mean anything to me now. And of course, I love those genres now, but I want to shout out, of course, probably the biggest music channel on YouTube. Anthony Fantano did a review of this album back in 2013. I loved the album cover, and he gave the album an 8. And at the time, I was just trying to find more stuff to get into when it came to metal-wise, and I was surprised, for one, because I feel like I'd be kind of surprised nowadays, too, because a lot of the time I would see him reviewing mostly hip-hop. And I like hip hop too, but I was looking for something more specific at the time. And I saw the thumbnail for this album review on there, and I watched it, and it got me interested. And I heard it, and I was taken away. I had finally been, I don't know what's the word. I've finally been initiated as a real like extreme metal fan, the more extreme forms of metal. And the album I'm talking about is Colored Sands by Gorguts. If I had to pick 10 albums that were important to me in the 2010s, that like the best albums to me that came out in the 2010s, this would probably be like this would be number 2, maybe even number 1, depending on the day. I heard this, and for some reason, it spoke to me on every level when it came to outside of metal, but music in general. Like, I heard it, and it was like, I finally understand. Luke LeMay, I can't express enough how important you are as a person to me when it comes to music and just how this album just struck a major chord with me. And when it comes to Gorguts now, I think Obscura is their best. That's where I am now. But I mean, again, the past two. I've had such a hard time talking about why these albums mean so much. I feel like maybe I should have made some notes or something like to express. But I kind of wanted to just go off the cuff and have passion behind it. It's something where I think about like how this record, it's one of the most emotional metal records that comes to mind. It feels like there's so much emotion behind everything happening here, with the way Luke screams, with the way the instrumental sound. They all sound so desperate, and like I've never heard music like at that point. I hadn't really heard music that sounded like it was crying out for help so much as I heard this album, which sounds crazy because the structures on these songs are unbelievably technical. Like, these are super technical songs, but also there's like this really sludgy and deep and thick production on everything. A lot of these songs are quite long. But yeah, like, I heard the first few notes of Le Tout du Monde, and I was just the da da like it, like that, just the dissonance of those chords mixed with like the double bass, and everything was just like, oh well, this is pretty great. And then and then it lulls down into that the boo da 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 da. Sorry. It just, I was like, wow, this is really cool sounding. And then I heard Luke, like, he's got like the screams are kind of the screams sound kind of far off in the distance, or they sound really muffled at this point before they come soaring in. And for some reason at this point, like, any kind of qualms I would have had about death growls before was just gone. Like, this record caught me at the perfect time. Like, my mind was open, I was ready to hear this, and it just hit me right here, man. Like, it really just hit me there, and it was just amazing. And then, of course, you just keep going down the track list. Forgotten Arrows is another one. Forgotten Arrows is, but I think a lot of people consider this to be one of their best songs now. Like, I feel like it's a really popular song for them now. It's, again, it's such a powerful, powerful album as well, along with Crimson. Like I said, nowadays, I put Obscura above it, and in some ways, I think I might even like From Wisdom to Hate maybe a little bit more. Something about like that kind of sound coming out of Gorguts is really, really good. But I mean, again, you ask me on any certain day, like right now, like maybe even right now, if you ask me like, what's your favorite Gorguts album, I'm like, oh man, Colored Sands, because now that I've been talking about it, it's reminded me how much I love it, and now I really want to listen to it again. But yeah, it's because of this album. Like, I got my first metal album on vinyl. It was Pleiades Dust. Whenever they announced that was coming out, I pre-ordered it. And this is another one I don't have like an idiot, but I have it in a cart on Discogs. When I was thinking about doing this video today, I was like, I got to look and see how much. I had this feeling that it was going to be ridiculously hard to find, and it's really not that hard. I can't wait to have it in my collection. And again, I can't express enough, like, Luke, thanks for making this. Thanks for making all the music you make, because if it wasn't for you doing this, I wouldn't have been so massive on this genre. Like I said, for coming up on 10 years. I'm very thankful for this album existing. And that is going to do it. So that's my list of 5. What did you guys think of it? Did you do you have any stories about these albums that you want to share? Do you Sorry, I've been talking for so long. Do you have anything like you want to add to this, or do you want to tell me I'm an idiot for not putting Left Hand Path instead of Wolverine Blues? Drop anything you want to say. Like I said, I mentioned a couple. I would say a couple of honorable mentions. You know, obviously, Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness was a big one. What else? There's, like I said, there's a ton. I could name multiple Death albums. Like I said, Death was big for me. I can name any other Gorguts albums. I got really into Hooded Menace with the Death Doom stuff. Like I said, some Paradise Lost really hit me. Obituary is another one now. That's really big. Bolt Thrower, I mentioned them earlier. Like I said, there's so many I can just keep going through, but there's a lot of great death metal out there, and a lot of people are going to have a different 5 because there's just so much. Like I said, I had heard Cannibal Corpse for years. I watched Ace Ventura when I was like 5 years old. I knew about Cannibal Corpse, but I'm still behind on the whole Cannibal Corpse train. I've just been so into all these other things I keep hearing. I keep letting my backlog get fuller and fuller and fuller, and like I said, still learning. I'm almost a decade in, and I'm still figuring this stuff out. And you'll come to find that out because I actually have a plan for next week's Metal Monday. And you will see what it is when it gets here. So I'm really excited to talk more about this. I'm really excited about this series. And yeah, guys, I hope you have a great day, and happy listening.